Welcome back, sports fans. Another episode of the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast. It is almost Christmas time and New Year's. It's a great time of year, including not just the bowl season for college football, but the advent of the 12-team playoff that will kick off this coming Friday, just a few days
Absolutely.
from when this episode comes out. A few days away, we get the first 12-team college football playoff game. And these games, if you looked at the forecast for a lot of these games outside of Austin, Texas, Darren, it's going to be cold.
Texas is really happy to be playing in Austin as opposed to Columbus, maybe. It's the first thing that pops into my head. Goodness gracious. Tennessee is going to be playing in some Rocky Top's going to have a snow cap on it. It's going to be cold.
Well, there's no exaggeration there. Temperatures below freezing. It's going to be a cold one for the games that are being played up north. Now, before we get too further along in this episode, would you do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button? It means a lot to us when you subscribe to the show.
Absolutely.
We do this because we love sports. We're just a couple of guys. We do this in-house, and we just love the fact that you love football as much as we do, and we get to share a little bit about it together.
Absolutely.
So hit that subscribe button, make comments, hit us with questions. We love the interaction, the feedback. We appreciate you so very much.
Absolutely.
Now, with that said, congratulations also are in order to Travis Hunter, this year's Heisman Trophy winner. Darren, we talked last week, the debate about, do you go with Travis Hunter? Do you go with Gente from Boise State? There are a lot of deserving people, but at the end of the day, it was Travis Hunter's unique role, I guess, in playing offense, defense. It's just not something that we see very often. But congratulations to Travis Hunter.
Yeah, and the one thing we can say, I think, that has been pretty clear since it was announced, that the people that thought Travis Hunter should win it feel like they were correct, and the correct person was chosen. The people that feel like Gente should have won it still feel like they were correct. And the Heisman voters got it wrong. I don't think the debate has settled at all just because a name was announced. It's still on social media, especially Twitter. It's been a pretty active, let's say it that way, back and forth about whether or not the right person got it. But like we talked about last week, you couldn't go wrong. Any other year when there's somebody not like Travis Hunter, then you have and I am saying that right, Gente, is that correct? From Boise State, he's clearing away. It's a no-brainer. But when somebody like Travis Hunter, as you said, with that skill set, it just elevates the profile and everything you see about that person and kind of how it fits in the Heisman description of exactly what the Heisman is looking for. So, like you said, many deserving people. Good for Travis Hunter. But, man, I hope all of those guys left New York this weekend or whenever hopefully feeling like they've accomplished as much as they have just to be there. What an incredible thing.
Well said. It is a huge accomplishment to make that short list and be invited to that ceremony. There's a part of me, though, Darren, when they put toward the end up on the screen the exact vote breakdown, and you looked at the votes for Cam Ward and Dylan Gabriel, and it's like, ouch. Yeah. It was a two-man race.
That's exactly right. Which probably even those two guys weren't overly surprised by that, because even the conversations it was a two-man conversation. So not overly surprising, but still kind of, if you're them, kind of hurts to see it in black and white up on the big screen. That's could have done without that.
Still, they were sitting there, and there's a whole lot more players that will never be invited. So congratulations to all four. Travis Hunter for coming with the hardware in winning this year's Heisman Trophy.
Absolutely.
Speaking of players and many more players than four, let's talk a little bit about the transfer portal, because this has created quite a bit of consternation across college football. I'd like to start with the conversation close to home, Darren, where you and I are here in Northwest Louisiana. We're
Mm-hmm.
right across the river from Shreveport, home of the Independence Bowl. And there was a lot of concern over what just happened. I know it's
Mm-hmm.
old news now, but a refresher. Army had accepted an invite to come to the Independence Bowl to face the Sun Belt champion Marshall, who had accepted an invite. As soon as Marshall's season ended, though, regular season, or winning their conference title, I should say, the head coach left for Southern Miss.
Mm-hmm.
They had 30 plus players enter the portal, including all three quarterbacks on the depth chart. It just was complete chaos. And they ended up saying, well, we can't come because of we don't have a team. We don't have enough players to safely field a team. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Here's where the problem came, Darren. They they made this decision known 2 weeks before the game.
Yeah, exactly.
I have my issue with Marshall and why it's such a bad look for that university
Mm-hmm.
is you do not accept the invitation to begin with. The reports were that Independence Bowl officials were making sure you are going to be able to come if you
Mm-hmm.
yeah. They were reassured for several days before making this decision. But thankfully, Louisiana Tech stepped in just down the road. And yeah, they're 5-7, and people are saying, why them? Well, there was a lot that went into that, but proximity was a big one.
Yeah.
They're just down the road. So, Darren, your thoughts about this? It really irritated me that Marshall did this.
Yeah. I think unfortunately, I think one of the things that the transfer portal kind of brings to light, or let's say puts an even bigger light on. I don't think it necessarily brings to light, but puts an even bigger light on is the disconnect that sometimes exists between administration and the actual student athletes themselves. Now, in fairness to administrations, most of the time the coach is that go between. He fills that gap, or the coaching staff, the athletic staff, or the team staff, whatever it is. I think they fill that gap that obviously exists. But I think you've got a real issue here, especially at Marshall, and I think it's not unique to them. Is the athletic staff, the department staff, athletic department staff as a whole, not really being plugged into the individual teams, not really being plugged into the student athlete. That disconnect exists, and I think it's why we see some of the problems that we see sometimes in sports. So I think this situation in particular takes that what was already a bright spotlight that was starting to be shown because of the transfer portal, makes it even bigger. Maybe throws it in on top of a magnifying glass or whatever. So I think that's a huge thing that athletic departments across college football, especially, but college athletics as a whole, needs to take a step back and say, wait a minute, did these guys just not have a clue? Because I think, unfortunately, the people in the athletic department that were saying, we're good, there is a good likelihood that there were several, if not all of them, that didn't have a clue that, what a 30% of the team that was left or whatever it was about to hit the portal. So I think that's a huge thing that comes out of this. Outside of that, I feel like part of what also went on here is maybe those that did know felt like maybe they could keep it from happening, and that's not it's not a good faith act. If you know something like that's got to go down, you got to take care of that on the front end. It is what it is. You hate it, but it almost, and I don't mean to be negative, but there's almost kind of a money grab feel to it. We're going to stick this out, see if we can force it to happen, because that revenue is going to be, that money coming in is going to be nice to the department, and I think that probably influenced a lot of this decision. And again, not just bashing Marshall. It's not unique to Marshall. We see it happen in athletic departments all the time. But I do feel like that's part of what a little bit what was exposed here. I hate it for the players that are left. But like you said, man, Louisiana Tech, they can get together parents and rent minivans and get the team here if they, an hour down the street from Ruston. They could carpool. The logistics can be worked out. So, and good for Louisiana Tech. Good for that program. They had some really, really good years where they were in bowls quite a long time, and it's good to see them be able to come back to the Independence Bowl and be able to do that.
Another factor here that we talked about, Darren, is the Independence Bowl getting back to focusing on regional teams.
Absolutely.
Now, any of the the academies, the armed services academies,
Mhm.
will be a big draw for this area.
It's
So
going to be
I
regional.
I
Yeah.
completely understand that.
Yep.
However, when you start getting Huntington, West Virginia, we talked about
Right.
this last week.
Hmm.
Why are we getting a Sun Belt team from West Virginia to
Yep.
come down to Shreveport, Louisiana? It just doesn't
Absolutely.
make a lot of sense. Tech will bring more fans.
Yep.
They will, of course, they're 60 miles down the road from
Right.
the stadium. It may not be as competitive as a game as we want because Army's got a really good team. I know
Yeah.
they lost to Navy this past Saturday,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
they've had a great
Yep.
season. So I think they really, the Independence Bowl officials, I know there's bowl tie ins and all kinds of political red tape there, but get back to let's focus on regional
Absolutely.
teams.
I, and I think ultimately what you said is exactly what we'll see happen because of the military tie, because of the local tie, and you know that Louisiana Tech and honestly the town of Ruston is going to do everything they can to rally behind this team, be excited because these guys are here and get to this game because I mean like we were talking about. I mean, you can door to door park in the parking lot of the stadium from just about anywhere in Ruston, and you've taken 60 minutes out of your day to get to the game. You know, you can get here. It's not an issue. So I'm hoping that I hope it's a big enough presence and enough happens. It's a big enough draw that it does kind of get some people's attention, and in future years, it's a reference point for hey, wait a minute, what if? I hope you're right, and that's exactly what happens.
Another topic of conversation related to the portal is the timing. Is this bad timing? Is
Hmm.
this hurting football? Now, granted, there is another window where
Right.
players can enter the portal, but there seems to be this mad rush. It's almost like imagine a big sale going on at a store somewhere and everyone's in a rush. I've got to make sure I get there. I'm not going to get what
Hmm.
I want if I don't get there right away. And there's a dire lack of patience, I guess, because teams are gobbling up the best guys in the portals. I know I'm an
Hmm.
LSU fan. We've had a great portal run so far,
Absolutely.
but those players weren't going to be there in 2 or 3 weeks from now.
No.
So I think there's a lot of moving parts here. There's got to be something though to and you've the NCAA really there's not a whole lot they can do right
Hmm.
now. So how do you police this, Darren? How do you set it up where bowl games are not being decimated
Right.
by the
Absolutely.
transfer portal?
And that's my biggest issue with this whole thing from an NCAA perspective. You know, we spent years without a playoff because of the amount of how much power the bowls. Now, specifically New Year's Day bowls, and I understand there's a distinction there between Sugar Bowl and Independence Bowl. Just to talk about the two in our state, a bit of a difference. I understand that, but the bowls as a whole, the amount of power they've had for decades, that we'll do the I'm just blank. What was the computer ranking? What was that called? Uh,
BCS.
BCS. There you go. Every letter I was coming up with wasn't it. So I was the BCS. We'll do that. That way, it's these two, and it's this computer ranking, and everybody still goes to their bowl and all of that kind of. Well, if the bowls have that much pull and that much power, and the revenue means that much, then open the portal after the last bowl game is played. You don't have to open the portal just because there's an early signing period. That is a completely different thing. You're talking about an 18-year-old that's graduating from college versus a 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, depending on how many years of eligibility they have right now, that's on their second, third school. Level the playing field a little bit. If you're in a bowl, you're not losing out on people. Also, if you're in a bowl, your team is in a bowl, but you're not necessarily in one of those top spots. Your status in the portal is not being hurt because other guys are being able to jump in. As soon as the final bowl game is played and the portal opens for 10 days, whatever it is, and then keep the spring one. I get the spring one. After spring practice, you kind of know where you're going to go. Okay, I get it. And that doesn't affect anything. But I don't see a reason that there should be a single portal on the books, being realistic conversation, that takes place until all bowl games are played. If they're that important and the revenue means that much, it seems to me to be a no brainer.
Yeah, I completely agree. We'll see
Yeah,
what changes are made. I think it's going to be addressed in some
it
shape,
has to
form,
be.
and fashion.
I agree completely.
Well, moving on from the portal to signing day, Darren, and
Yeah.
this is obviously exciting for you.
Yeah. I keep up with everything. You know how that is.
So, what you got on signing day?
Well, speaking of exciting for me, it was also very exciting for Texas, Alabama, and Georgia because they are not only the top three in the SEC, but in the top of all of college football. Little fun fact: five-star recruits, Texas, Alabama, and Georgia combined had a total of nine. Make sure my math is right. Yeah, nine five-star recruits. The other 13 remaining teams in the SEC did not have that many. So those three teams had actually, it ended up worked out being almost double. The other 13 had, well, actually, it was just a little bit less than double. The other 13 teams had five-star recruits, and Texas, Alabama, and Georgia had nine. With Texas leading on top of that, they are also the best class in the SEC. Alabama two, as I said, Georgia three. Got to give Hugh Freeze a little bit of props. Auburn at four and A&M at five. LSU still got right in there, almost top five. Ended up at number six. I tell you, an important thing for LSU is the amount of commits. They also had 23 signees in this early period, and with all of the roster issues that you've seen them have, that's a really nice number for them. Vanderbilt got really close to LSU, only missed them by, well, 10. Vanderbilt was last in the SEC in the recruiting class. But, I'll give Clark Lee credit. He's being upfront and honest about it. He said, yeah, we've got a small recruiting class. They only have 13 commits because we knew what positions we were going to address through recruiting and what positions we were going to, roster positions we were going to address through the portal. And we did not try to uh, go between that and change it up anyway. We knew what we were going for in both scenarios, and we stuck with it. So, I mean, right, wrong, or indifferent, he's got a plan. He's going to stick with it. We'll see how that goes. But because 13 is a very small signing class, but for Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, A&M, and even LSU fans, you've got stuff to be excited about in the portal and in recruiting because those schools are also toward the top in the portal as well, portal rankings. So a good few days if you're one of those schools for sure.
Any word on Diego's case?
At this time, no. He is still pursuing it. And the last thing I heard him in an interview say that he had a couple of new people, that kind of advisors, whatever, step in and look at the case and feel like he might actually have a case. But even in the interview, he said, but there's basically just as many people saying, maybe not. And he said the two interviews I've heard him speak the most in that were kind of Vanderbilt centric interviews. It wasn't national media. He's been very honest, and he's treating this bowl game as his last game at Vanderbilt. So I that probably tells you what you need to know about the realistic nature of the case. He gave it a shot. Who knows? But as of right now, even he's treating it like his time at Vanderbilt has come to an end. So,
yeah, we'll see.
yeah.
In addition to signing day, we can't go to the college football playoffs. Well, we would be remiss if we did without
Right.
mentioning two high profile hires this past week in college football. The first one, Hall of Fame, NFL Hall of Fame coach Bill Belichick is entering the college ranks, accepting the coaching head coaching position at North Carolina.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a head scratcher, Darren. So you've had a chance to process it. What's your take on this?
Well, first of all, everybody that had that on their bingo card, raise your hand. Anybody out there watching that raised your hand? Confessionals are open 24/7. You can always, repent on the front pew, depending on where you attend on Sunday morning, because you're not telling the truth. So let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. You know, Early on in the conversation, or in everything that was coming out, I thought to myself, what is happening? Why is this happening? Then I saw a report that said um, that part of the negotiation was his son being a part of the staff and having the title, basically as soon as he's hired, as coach in waiting. And I honestly believe I've seen probably about 4 interviews with Belichick, a couple of them right before he accepted the job, when there were just interviews taking place, and a couple after. And from what I'm understanding, I believe his decision to get into the college ranks is based as much on his experience as a professional NFL general manager as it is an NFL coach. I believe he believes he is going to be able to bring something to roster management in the NIL and portal era that we live in that will give him an edge. And he will also have the opportunity, with his son being on staff, to be able to train him in that as well. And not only affect, obviously, his son and what his son is able to do down the road, even after he's gone from North Carolina, if things go to plan, but also have a significant effect on North Carolina. I mean, the plan that you would think he seems to be putting in place with everything that's been talked about, he's not looking at it as, I'll spend a couple of years and I'll move on. I mean, I think he believes he can shape the program in a way that no one's ever done it before, and it will give them an edge. And I saw an interview where he talked about just how much he loved college ball, because his dad coached like 40 years at Navy or something like that. Was a coach at the Navy, not necessarily the head coach, but spent 40 years in that program. So growing up, he was in and around Navy all the time, which, by the way, just for informational purposes, Bill Belichick's dad was also on the Vanderbilt football staff during that same era for 1 year with Paul Bear Bryant. So Vanderbilt has a legacy of having people early on and missing out, not really seeing what they had. So anyway, that's just an
All right.
interesting little side note.
All right.
But I think he has a passion for the game as a whole, and I think he feels like he can bring an expertise that will give them an edge. I mean, what coach doesn't? But I can see where he's coming from because of his experience as a general manager. His the logic of it makes sense to me. How about you? What are your thoughts on it, Ben?
It does, if college football has indeed made that
Right.
transition to you're no longer running a program, you're running an organization as a general
Mm-hmm.
manager would.
Absolutely.
I think Belichick's football IQ is unquestioned. His
Mm-hmm.
success in the NFL, he stepped into a whole different beast, though.
Yep. Yep.
This is so much different. And one of the things a question is going to be is how much are the North Carolina fans going to contribute to any type of NIL collective fund
Right.
that would put them on competitive footing with the heavy hitters in college
Right.
football? I think that's going to be his biggest challenge. The NFL, you're drafting the elite of the
Mm-hmm.
elite that come out of the college ranks, and he had the opportunity to work with Tom Brady, for example,
Absolutely.
and win quite a few Super Bowls together. He's got Bryce Baker, which was a big pickup for them. I don't know. I'm waiting. I have my doubts. I don't
Right.
doubt his football acumen. I doubt how successful he's going to be in this whole new world in which he's stepped into.
I agree completely. And the one additional thing I'll say is that I think you hit at without saying it per se is there's a big difference in evaluating someone coming out of college and how they're going to fit on your roster full of professional adults, and evaluating the talent of an 18-year-old, 17-year-old senior in high school. There's a big difference in those two things. And I think that's going to be one of the very first things that we see as a potential hurdle. You know what? He might already have a plan and it works out. Who knows? Have my doubts, but I think that's one of the very first things we'll see as a hurdle, as a potential hurdle.
We've already seen what Belichick's going to do is surround himself with. He's going to try to get the right people in the right positions.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's face it, I don't see Belichick out on the recruiting trail all the
No.
time, sitting in recruits' homes, talking to parents.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole change from the NFL. But I think he's going to hire guys who are going to be really good with that, much similar to how Brian Kelly has done it at LSU.
Absolutely.
He's got some phenomenal recruiters down there. And so I think we'll see a similar model in that regard. Uh,
Absolutely.
Another big coaching hire this week is actually a return home.
Mm-hmm.
Rich Rodriguez, who one of the most successful coaches at West Virginia, had an
Mm-hmm.
incredible run. Took them to well, they were up there, weren't they? They were
Yeah.
except for that one loss to Pitt that year. They were going to the national championship game, and the way
Mm-hmm.
they were playing that year, we could we could probably argue that they would have won the national title that year.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Uh, and then things came crashing down. There, it didn't end amicably. He left for Michigan. His career has taken twists and turns since then. West Virginia has not achieved that level of success. I think they haven't had
No.
a 10-win season since 2007.
Right.
So now this reunion takes place with Rodriguez is from West Virginia.
Right.
He's coming back home, and love him or hate him, you can't argue with the success that he had. Now, this hire has gotten national attention. Pat McAfee
Absolutely.
was there, and he was touting it, and he was really building up the Mountaineer football
Mm-hmm.
program. So when you look at this, Darren, Rodriguez is no spring chicken, but you look at Belichick's no spring chicken. Brian Kelly's no
Right.
spring chicken. What do you think about this hire? Good for West Virginia?
You know, you can't blame them. I mean, why not? Yes, the era is a little bit different. Things are not the same as they were when he was there the first time, but it's a guy that brought you success that you hadn't seen before and you hadn't seen since. Why not, if you can work out all the kinks, why not make it happen? Give it a shot. Put him under contract and say, man, let's see if we can find this again for all of us. Found it interesting to find out, just as a side note, that Coach Saban was a part of was basically the selection committee along with the athletic director. So I found that interesting that he felt like it was a good hire and was excited about it. I felt like Rich Roy could bring some things back to West Virginia that had been missing since he was there, and you know I don't I don't see why not. I guess that's my, if you're West Virginia, why not? I mean, the guy did it there in a different era, and part of his beef with administration was the lack of support for the program. And if they might not be in the upper echelon of program support, but they've definitely come a long way from where they were when he was there. So if that's worked out, yeah, why not? Find lightning in a bottle and let's see if we can make us all happy again. I don't blame them. How about you?
I think it's renewed excitement
Mm-hmm.
around the program,
Mm-hmm.
the fan base. Neil Brown, roughly a 500 record in his time there, that never took off like they thought it
No.
would. The excitement seemed to be waning. And there's just comes a time when you realize, hey, we're in a funk here. And
No.
so they made the change with Brown. This is like a shot in the arm. I don't know if he'll be as successful as he was. The game has changed, but he has been a part of the game just at different
Right.
places
It's different. Right.
since
Exactly.
leaving West Virginia. Uh, I think he said all the right things at his press
Hmm.
conference, acknowledging that how he left was not the best way to leave, and he made mistakes, and he owns
Absolutely.
that, and he wants to earn people's trust back, and he's going to get that opportunity.
Hmm.
But they love their football in West Virginia, and this was a shot in the arm. It was a positive look for the program on the national stage.
Hmm.
So we'll wait and see. I don't know if he can get Pat White and Tavon Austin and Stedman Bailey, and you go on and on
Right.
with the. I mean, he had some phenomenal teams at West
Yep.
Virginia, incredible
Absolutely.
offenses.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. His mind's still there. He seems to still have the energy. He's got Pat McAfee as like his number one super fan.
He is basically his megaphone at this point. I mean, goodness gracious, yeah.
They're in the Big 12. You look at where the Big 12 is right now. West
Yeah,
Virginia has a path to the college football playoff. They're
absolutely.
in a really good spot.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens. I think it'd be good for college football to have West Virginia back up there knocking on the door.
And in the transfer portal era, noise around the program is a beautiful thing and can open up some portal doors that may not have been opened up otherwise. So, like I said, it's worth a
Absolutely.
shot. I agree.
Yep. Let's talk about the college football playoffs, Darren, coming up. We've got
So much
some
fun.
major games on the horizon. Let's jump right into looking at SEC teams in the 12-team college football playoff. We're not going to cover all the playoff games. We know, for example, if you're looking at the screen right now, we have a Saturday game. We know there's Friday game, Indiana, Notre Dame. We're not. They're not SEC schools, so we're not going to talk about them on this particular show. So
Yeah.
let's talk about the Saturday 3 p.m. matchup, December 21st on TNT. The Clemson Tigers traveling to Austin, Texas, and both teams are probably glad to be in Austin. It's going to be about 60
Yeah.
degrees as opposed to 30. A
Yeah.
good matchup here. Texas, both storied programs.
Hmm.
Texas is a favorite. Clemson had to have some help and then
Yeah.
pull off an upset to get here. Darren, who do you like in this one?
Well, and the reason Clemson had to have some help and pull off an upset to get here was because their final regular season opponent was an SEC team that handled business when they got on the field with Clemson, and I think we're going to see a repeat of that. I think there is such a, and of course we don't try to hide it that we love the SEC. So this is not going to shock anybody that's listening or watching to this. There's just such a difference, especially when you look at SEC versus ACC and the level of play on the field. Uh, When you look at Texas is holding other teams to less than 250 yards a game in total offense, I think that is the, for lack of a better term, area of expertise that Texas will shine the most in. I think they will, in a pretty significant way, shut down this Clemson offense. I know they 450 yards a game. I get it, but when you look at Texas's 445 yards a game and the level of competition that they pulled that off against versus Clemson and their 454 yards a game and who they pulled that off against, those just aren't equal stats. And I think this will be Quinn Ewers' moment to shine, and he will take full advantage of it offensively. And I think the same thing goes for this Texas defense. I think they are going to show up with showing out in mind, and I think they do it. I think Clemson will pretty early on not know what hit them. So I think this is a
Yeah.
Texas win. How about you?
Yeah, Texas is bigger, faster,
Mm-hmm.
deeper than
Mm-hmm.
SMU, and that's not a
No,
knock on SMU. It's just
no,
this is a really good Texas team.
absolutely.
I think that's going to be a little too much for Clemson to handle coming
Mm-hmm.
in. I think they'll throw their punches at the Longhorns. Dabo will
Absolutely.
have something up his sleeve, but at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
Texas is just going to be too much over the course of the 4 quarters. I've got the Longhorns winning this one.
Agree completely.
Another playoff game that evening in frigid Columbus, Ohio, 7 o'clock kickoff for at least for us Central Time,
Yeah,
S-
Central Time.
Saturday night. I don't know how happening of a city Columbus is on Saturday night. I figure everyone's going to be at the stadium.
I should say the U will be happening, right?
Yeah,
Or the horseshoe, sorry.
as the Tennessee Volunteers come to town. Did you say the U?
Yeah,
Oh,
I did.
if we have any Buckeye fans listening, which I doubt that we do,
Yeah.
you've offended the one or two that happen to tune in.
Let me apologize to Doug. That's why I'll start there.
I don't know if Doug even listens anymore, so you're probably safe. You're probably safe.
That's true.
Let's just hope Brutus didn't hear that.
Yeah, that's right. I might get a black eye from the Buckeye. Thank you. I'll be here all week.
Both teams coming in at 10-2. This looks like a great matchup on
Yeah,
paper. Josh Heupel's bringing. He had the Volunteers, took them through some stormy waters this
yeah.
season, but he's got them in the playoffs. Going to the road on the road to Columbus against the Buckeyes. Darren, who do you like in this one?
Uh, as I said before, obviously we kind of tend to favor the SEC. I do think this will be a much more significant matchup than the Texas Clemson game. Um, I, I think I would have been even more confident in that prior to the Ohio State Michigan game. I think that shakes your confidence in Ohio State a little bit when you see what Michigan was able to do. I do think Tennessee can seize control of the game through their running game. If they can get Ohio State focused on the running game and specifically Dylan Sampson, get focused on him and not only open up lanes for Nico's arm, but more importantly, I think open up lane for Nico's feet, for him to get outside of the pocket, get 10, 12 yards, break off a 30, 35-yard run in a significant situation. I think if that kind of path opens up for Tennessee, that is a very clear path for victory to them. And honestly, I think they can do it. I think Tennessee can make those things happen. I think their defense is strong enough to put Ohio State behind the chains, keep them in comfortable situations, keep them in 3rd and 7 or longer, which is not a situation any team, but especially Ohio State wants to be in. And then that will allow their offense to do similar to, not on the same level, but do similar to what they did in the Vanderbilt game. Come out and put together 12, 15-yard drives where you just drive it down the field and establish, or 12, 15 play drives and establish dominance. I think those two things, two sides of the ball, can complement each other and make that happen for Tennessee, and it's a Tennessee win. How about you, Ben?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a tough game. This is
Yeah.
Big Ten weather.
Yeah.
It's going to hurt when you get hit. It's going to be
Yeah.
cold. The ground's going to be hard. It's a hostile environment. I would imagine I'd be surprised if the Buckeyes don't focus on stopping Dylan Sampson in the ground
Absolutely.
game. Put the pressure on Nico to
Mm-hmm.
make some plays throughout the game. Now he's capable of doing that,
Yeah.
but I anticipate a low scoring game. Uh, I think the Tennessee defense is, of course, one of the best in the country. This Ohio State defense is not too shabby either.
Right.
I think it's going to come down to one or two big plays is going to be the difference in this game. A lot of ball control. I think Nico is going. He's going to have to step up and make one or two of those big plays for the
Agree completely.
Volunteers to win. At the end of the day, though, I I think they pull this out. I know this is people are saying this is a must win for Ryan Day
Yeah.
with his lack of success in the postseason. Now he's got a home playoff game. Does he
Mm-hmm.
survive this if he loses? I don't know the question of that.
Yeah.
Buckeye fans can chime in on that one, but I do think he's got a lot more pressure on him than Heupel has.
Agree completely. Great point. Great point.
We'll have another bonus episode this week, which will pick more SEC teams in the bowl games. There's quite a few in the bowl games, and so I'm getting scatterbrained, Darren. It must be a Monday night,
Yeah, exactly. A
but we
Monday
appreciate
night, and you're excited about the playoffs, right? I mean, that kind of creates,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, yeah. So excited about the playoffs. This is going to be a fun weekend.
Very much
Thank you
so.
for watching another episode. Look for that bonus episode this week in which we pick all the SEC bowl games that will be played. That will be coming out in the next day or two. Hit that subscribe button, that like button. We appreciate you. Enjoy watching football this weekend. Until next time, y'all take care.
Have a great week.
Thank you for making the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast your go-to sports show. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our show if you haven't already. Your feedback is important. Let us know what you think about this week's show. Send an email to brewandshavers@gmail.com or text to our text line, 318-390-3599. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for listening to the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast. See you next week.